Good evening, ladies, gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 972. The weekly show all about weather for weather geeks, dweebs, nerds, dorks, and weenies. Hey, this is for September 2nd, 2024. It's Labor Day, and we are doing the show on Labor Day this year. All right, and hopefully we're live. Normally the little live icon comes up a little early. I might be talking to myself right now. If that's the case, that's a little strange. Here we go. Now we're live. Yes, I see everything up. So welcome to Weather Brains number 972, 972 for September 2nd, 2024, the weekly show for weather dweebs, geeks, nerds, dorks, and weenies. All right. Yeah, so some years we postponed the Labor Day show to Tuesday night, but I think it just kind of worked out where everybody was going to be able to go tonight. So let's do it. We're going to be on the air everywhere. And we'll have a couple of folks that are out. Probably half the staff will be out, but that's okay. We will make it happen. I'm excited. We've got some good guests coming on the show tonight. We're going to talk about the tropics, very controversial topic these days. And then everybody's a little prickly about the tropics. And a lot of robust discussion, I'll put it that way, on Weather X and the other platforms about the hurricane season, what's happened so far, what hasn't happened so far, the preseason hurricane outlook and thoughts on what's to come. And I will say that the social media nonsense, it's off the charts. I finally just stopped and did a video Saturday morning. It's just some of these thumbnails are just you can't make this stuff up. I guess it's coming from YouTube, but you got these guys showing Category 4 hurricane striking Florida on September 5th, and you got a wave in the middle of nowhere that hasn't even developed yet, and somehow, and and the thing is, look, this horse is out of the barn. It's not going to come back in. The scammy, thumbnails and insanity. It's just going to be out there. What I don't understand is why people choose to follow this stuff, and they almost do it like a religion kind of thing, where these guys can do no wrong, even if they're wrong all the time. Well, he told us what could have happened. He told us what could have happened. He told us what could have happened. Well, an asteroid could strike the Earth tomorrow. I'm not going to get on there and do some YouTube thumbnail about that. I mean, it's just, we live in very strange times. And I'm afraid that people, they don't know what truth is, and they don't know how to find truth. And I think the biggest problem is that as a nation, and we've talked about it on the show before, is that we've lost our ability to think critically. When I was in high school, they had a course called critical thinking, and it was wonderful. You learn how to think and make decisions that are credible based on sorting out information and learning what's true and what's not true. And I sense it is a nation, we've lost that, and we've just become these mindless lemmings. And a lot of it starts with politics, I guess. You follow your right wing or left wing political leaders, and you just think that they can't make a mistake, and whatever they say is true, and people just can't get past that. So I don't know. It's all social science. It's all about Kim. But anyway, let's bring in some folks here. But yeah, the obviously with a situation like that, it will be an interesting show tonight. I know Bill Murray, I do believe, is going to be with us, and let's see. Ooh, James A. looks like he is off. Not working tonight. You are not in the newsroom.
Absolutely not. Taking a little Labor Day action here.
I look back on. I don't take holidays, and I'm not. It's great that you can. It's wonderful. I think as I've gotten older and our kids are out of the house and we're empty nesters, it's not as important now as it used to be. So I typically like to work and give the younger people the time off that have kids and ball games and all the things that I used to do. But I'll tell you what, James A., to this day, you know what I'm thankful for? In my career, and I have been doing this 175 years, I have never had to do a 9 o'clock Central Time newscast.
Ooh,
which
they're
is a
great fun. You should
miracle.
try it.
No. What's happened with that being the case? I do a 6 o'clock and a 10 o'clock Central Time, but that enabled me for all those years to go to the ballpark, to go to the school, to go to for you know.
Oops, you're cutting
I
out a
got
little bit.
knocked off here.
Yeah,
Uh,
and that's part of our
hang
house
on.
hunting was figuring out where we could be.
What happened?
Oh, your audio's
Rings.
cutting
It
out a little bit.
grabs. Yeah, when my phone rings, it grabs control of
Ah.
Uh, the audio hijack program. The question is, what nitwit is going to call me on a Monday night at 7 o'clock? Probably one of our two children, but that's okay.
Or
All
one of
right.
the panelists.
Well, they're not expecting the show to be on Labor Day. This is unusual.
Now, all that said, I used to call when I worked weekend mornings at NBC5 in Dallas. I would always call my mother's cell phone when I knew she was in church. And I think she finally caught on to me.
Yeah. Um, yeah, in the way it works with me, I've got the phone, linked up with the tablet and the computer. So when it rings everything, and everything kind of freaks out, and the computer doesn't know quite what to do with it. And when you got this, the audio hijack thing's a little complicated. The audio routing that I do to make this thing work. So anyway, but I think we're back. In fact, let me play the. Sometimes I have to restart the soundboard here. Let's see if y'all can hear the foghorn. Did y'all hear the foghorn?
We did.
Okay, well that's good.
Science is in.
Haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah, I got so many things I've not played in so long.
Yeah, after 18 and a half years, you kind of collect a few things in the attic.
I can't listen to that. That's bad.
Bad memories we live every day.
All right, let's see here. Brad and Josh, can y'all hear us?
Yep.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Awesome.
Yes.
We apologize in advance for ruining your Labor Day evening, but thank you.
Not at all.
You're making ours.
No, this is going to be good. This is going to be the best show we've had in a while. I feel good about this one.
Yeah, this is the first night of Guest Booking Officer 3.0, James.
3.0.
Yeah, Mr. Adair came through. He got
Good.
my white whale. I've been waiting for Mr. Morgan since Dorian.
Oh,
He's kind of a big deal. He's kind of a big deal. I mean, I'm
we have to get Bill Curtis to recut
on the show here.
that intro.
Yeah.
I guess we really are kind of a big deal tonight.
I mean, if we look at it really closely, Josh, we may end up spending more time in Japan this year than we do in the Atlantic Basin.
man, what a dud. I'm sorry, I know that's politically incorrect word, but man, the Atlantic has been a dud.
So far.
Yeah, I might be happy.
Yeah, let's hold the good stuff. Let's hold the good stuff till the show starts. I mean,
hey Jen, where are you?
In my studio.
Okay.
Yeah.
First time you've ever been there?
I don't think so. I kept bouncing around to different rooms to find the best lighting, and this is it. So I'm in my studio upstairs.
I got to turn on the Florida State.
Roy's in the house, in the library.
I guess, or can I watch
books.
the Florida State game? Is it on ESPN or is it on your channel, James?
I have no clue.
It's on
I don't know.
ESPN. I can't watch it.
Did y'all see Florida show just how hard it is to win?
Brett, you're muted.
Hill Griffin Stadium. Ooh.
Yeah, we could do football brains for a while
I don't have my usual setup. I'm kind of in transit, so I don't have my microphone and camera, but it's all just the stuff that's in the laptop. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I usually have
a whistle.
Setup. Okay, good.
Clean as a whistle.
All right, good.
Yeah, Josh, you've outdone us basically. So just let you know
really.
that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. No doubt he's outdone us.
Watch that,
He's got super internet in that hurricane house.
I'm not in hurricane house.
Just for
I'm in transit. Oh yeah. No, I'm not. I am not in hurricane house, which I do like. Hurricane house has a good tech setup, so everything just works clean as a whistle. But this will do, I think.
Yeah,
an undisclosed location. I
exactly.
like it.
Exactly on the West Coast. Exactly.
Yes, undisclosed. All right, so we'll just for everybody's information here, we'll start in about 15 seconds. That's when the TV hits. This is on local television, and of course we're live on YouTube, and most people listen. So I can't start until this moment. Welcome to those watching on the TV side, WeatherBrains. It's Monday night, the Monday night weather party, so we can get started. So let's get the recorders going here. Track number 1 and track number 2, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
Hey, WeatherBrains episode number 972. It is the weekly show all about weather for weather dweebs, geeks, nerds, dorks, and weenies. The Monday night weather party. Hard to believe we're coming up on show 1000. At some point, we'll have to figure that out. That's going to be where we're going to do this. It's going to be next spring. We know that. But Jen, I would say out of all the folks, regulars on the show, you have more common sense than most of us. So maybe you can figure it out.
Yeah, I'm the one who went to Dora. I'm just kidding. I did go there. I wanted to check out that area. But no, I don't know where we should have it. It's actually on St. Patty's Day. Is our
Chicago.
show.
Oh wow, yeah.
So it would be fun.
Well,
try
can
to do
you
something.
travel on that day, James? Is that going to be possible, or are we tied down?
what day of the week is it? I mean, what day of the month is it?
It'll be March.
When is it?
Yeah, St. Patty's Day.
But
the problem is right smack dab in the middle of the tornado season, which always means there's a great inherent danger of something happening with severe weather. This year, we had nothing.
But in Alabama, James, the tornado season runs from January 1 to December 30th.
Right.
So,
I mean, 365 days
a
year.
There you go.
366 days every fourth year.
Yeah, no. For this show, I'll travel. The problem is I can't do it if we have a severe weather situation going on here. But we'll anyway.
We'll decide 2 weeks out. That'll be perfect. We'll just like everything else we do.
Yeah, those forecasts always work.
So, and we will do a quick football brains review. Jen, how'd Penn State do?
They did great. Yep, we had a great win at West Virginia with a very long lightning delay. So it was pretty bad in Morgantown on Saturday. So we didn't let it rattle us, and I think it was 34-16. I can't remember now. I don't remember the score, but anyway, we played pretty good. So we'll see. We're at home this week against Bowling Green, Ohio.
Ooh, okay. So Mississippi State won 82-3, I think. They played East Aboga Community College in a big rivalry there. So Troy, how did Troy had A&M Texas?
Move on, please. Keep on moving on. Texas A&M.
No comment,
it wasn't horrible, but we lost to Notre Dame, and it's what it is.
How much is that buyout going to cost y'all, Troy?
I have no idea at this point. Meanwhile, here in Austin, of which the place I'm affiliated with, University of Texas, sat and watched from the Emergency Operations Center yesterday, and that was a pretty solid win if you watch that. And we played Colorado State.
All right, so let's go out to James A. How'd the OU Friday night special go?
51-3 over Temple. So everybody happy. Even the University of Tulsa managed to win in a blowout fashion, and those are few and far between, and we're all happy when that happens.
Yeah.
So, and again, for those that don't know, I do the support at the University of Alabama football games, and we had a whopper of a downpour prior to the game, which sent the tailgaters scrambling. But it worked out, to cool the atmosphere down. It was in the 70s at kickoff. The rain ended, and the game went off just fine. So we did not have any lightning issues. But that's enough for football brains, Bill Murray. Let's bring in our guest. This is going to be a good show. This is going to be a good one.
Yeah, I just had to say, I was hoping Alabama would hit 70, something that Coach Saban didn't do during all his years there. And I was taken back to a game in 1973 when Alabama played James, do you remember, Vandy beat Virginia Tech this week, but back then they were called VPI, Virginia Polytechnic,
Yeah.
and Alabama beat them 77-6 one night. And I think it was like 70-0 at the half or something insane. And I was hoping they were going to break 100. So, but anyway, we didn't do too badly. I was going to ask about the Bixby Spartans. That's the team I was mostly concerned about.
Owasso beat them pretty good in the Battle of the Suburbs. All the SUVs in the Tulsa Metro were at that game, I think.
Well, tonight we welcome back a friend of the podcast. He's a renowned storm chaser, meteorologist, and a serial entrepreneur. He's responsible for snagging tonight's guest for us. Brett Adair, welcome back to the show.
Good evening, folks. How are you guys?
I had some hope Friday night the Braves might be heading for that 7th division pennant. I see that shirt there, Brett. It didn't go so well Saturday and Sunday night, did it?
Oh man, you've got a chance to win every game in that series, except maybe one where Wheeler threw that gem. But Michael Harris made a play that was probably for the record books.
That was a play for the ages. So we switched from football brains to baseball brains. But Brett, how many companies are you running now? I can't even keep up.
I don't know, too many. My head's spinning these days. The biggest one that we have, as you've seen, that we've got going right now, since the weather's relatively quiet, has been the tower cams and weather station solutions that we're putting out. We call them has cams, and we've been putting out lots of those lately, and we're working on some new deals with news media. We're about to put one up in Pell City here in St. Clair County. They received a grant so that we can get one there. So working really hard at that right now, just on the expansive nature of that. And then we've built a bunch of mobile remote cameras for tropical cyclones and blizzards as we go forward. I know there are a lot of versions of that out there, but we've got some now that will stream in 4K live. So going to be interesting if we can get another system here in the Atlantic Basin to test those on, but it's been busy.
Might have to put them on a ship and send them to Japan, Brett Adair. Well, Brett, we're so thankful for you being here tonight. Please jump in and help enhance this conversation. And we want to hear some more about the cool stuff that you're doing a little bit later in the show. But thank you for putting together tonight's guest. And that WeatherBrain is the world's top hurricane chaser. Present company excluded there, Brett. To date, he's penetrated the inner cores of 74 hurricanes and typhoons on the ground, a world record. When he's not prowling the globe for cyclones, appearing on TV, promoting products, or spreading the gospel of hurricane preparedness, he lives quite a life in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, one of my favorite places on the planet, 1 block from the Gulf of Mexico, in a new specially designed fortified hurricane house. We are long overdue for a visit from the hurricane man himself. Josh Morgan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I was delighted to finally be invited. I was wondering for years where that invitation was, and then
it's buried in your Twitter account during Hurricane Dorian. If you can go back till then, you'll find it, because
wow,
I know you were a little busy that weekend.
When I was presumed dead, I was off the grid and presumed dead for days on that island, and when I got back to civilization, I'd gained 50,000 Twitter followers, and that the phone was just like lighting up constantly. Yeah, so I think I missed a few important messages, probably.
Yeah, I probably missed that one. I had an epiphany. I don't even remember what day it was, but I bet Brett Adair knows how to get hold of Josh, and boom. And so we had run completely out of guests, Josh. You were one of the ones we'd been looking to have on for a long, long time. And I thought I let them run down to 0, and I thought we'd start off with a bang tonight. So thank you for being here. So talk to us about how you got interested in weather to start with. That's always, usually our first overriding question, particularly hurricanes. And when did you find out that you were interested in them?
I think my interest goes back, probably Brett, who's another chaser, can relate to this. It goes back as far as I can remember. I don't remember sort of developing an interest in the weather. I just remember as far back as I can remember, just getting turned on by, lightning, thunder. If the wind would blow and the house would shake. I grew up on Long Island on the East Coast. We'd get hurricanes on occasion, not like the kind we get in the Gulf of Mexico, but we get events up there. But it just went as far back as I could remember. I just get turned on by it. It was like drugs. Any kind of weather. And that feeling, that's just like, I think that's just, you're born with that. It's like, I don't know if it's like something like your screw is loose or whatever it is, but it was just that. So when I was 14, I would make my dad take me to the seashore when we were getting a storm and stuff. And then as soon as I was able, like when I was in college, I started hunting storms, and this was back, when I started chasing, this is, I don't want to date myself. This is before the internet, before Twister, before all that stuff. So I didn't even know there was a thing called storm chasing. I didn't know there was a word for it. I didn't have any role models. There's a hurricane that was going up the coast, and I just wanted to be where it was going to be. And I got in a train because I was too young to rent a car. And my first chase was on a train, but it was about trying to get where the hurricane was going to come ashore, just because I wanted to experience it. No camera, no devices, no social media, no nothing. Just wanted to be in it, be in the moment.
I noticed you list on your fabulous iCyclone website Hurricane Bell, a memorable hurricane to me because it came right to you where you live. You had to be pretty young, but I remember that storm trying desperately on the radio to find any news about it as it passed Cape Hatteras and got to New York City. And the only thing I remember is them saying on the CBS News at the top of the hour that people were sitting in the windows of the world on top of the World Trade Center as the gale force winds buffeted the building as the hurricane passed to the east.
Yeah, that was my very first hurricane. Of course, that wasn't a chase. I was a toddler, but I do remember it. And what stuck out for me, it struck in the middle of the night. The eye passed right over my town in Long Island. It's Category 1, but up in the Northeast, that's a big deal. So I remember waking up the next day and how the neighborhood looked. It was just transformed. I mean, it was just a real mess, and when you're young and you have no life experiences, and things like that really make an impression on you. I was just like, God, like what happened in the middle of the night to just make the neighborhood look so like messed up like that? And that kind of got me asking questions of my father, like, what happened last night? What was that? And that was kind of like the start of it.
Yeah, and so that hurricane was, when I was just beginning to, follow them because, before that we didn't, and even then we didn't have NOAA weather radio. We had to call a number and hope that the forecaster in Birmingham actually put some information about the hurricane on the local forecast. Because I would drive them crazy otherwise at at the Weather Service on West Oxmoor Road, calling them and asking them to read the advisories to me, and they were awful sweet to do that. But that was one of the first hurricanes that I was actively chasing on the internet.
Oh yeah, no, it's funny you talk about that lack of information. So I became a weather nerd and started like really tracking hurricanes in the early 80s. That was when I was old enough, and my God, looking back then I remember like on CNN, this one especially nerdy meteorologist that I like would have sort of like a tropical update every day at like 11:15, and it was like the only time you'd get to see a satellite picture of the entire Atlantic. It was like the one time per day I'd like rigidly be in front of the TV to watch that. So there's no internet, no computer models, nothing. There's no information. I mean, kids now they would just be aghast if they knew how weather nerds at that era grew up, just the lack of information. And even when there was a hurricane, how hard it was to get the advisories. I remember the National Hurricane Center for a long time had a telephone number that you would call, and I just called it incessantly to get a recording of the advisory. And my dad 1 month just flipped out of the phone bill. It was like, I mean, it's like, instead of calling sex lines, I was such a nerd calling like the Hurricane Center. This is like
show title.
Yeah, show title.
Yeah.
It was like the biggest nerd on the planet. My dad, like, he didn't realize how lucky he was, but it was like he flipped out of me with the phone bill because I was calling for Hurricane Center advisories.
Yeah, they could have funded the whole Hurricane Center with just a 900 number between you and me, Josh.
It's insane that we had to do that to get just basic information about storms. Then I got my NOAA weather radio, but that helped a little bit. My father started knowing what things to get me for Christmas. He got me that. He got me a barometer. so that in the eye of Hurricane Gloria, which passed over us when I was 15, I actually got a pressure reading in the eye. It was the first time I did that. I was, in a big aneroid barometer, with the dial and everything.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, and it was actually accurate to within like a millibar, incredibly, but that was kind of fun.
Yeah, and you're kind of known for that now. You've recorded a lot of observations in the eye, and
Yeah.
it's amazing how much that I'd always heard about the pressure. What's the term? Fluctuating, in the eye in Debbie. What is that called, James? It was Keith Blackwell that was under the bridge there, I think in Defuniak Springs during Eloise in 1975. Pumping of the barometer, I think is what they called it. And I saw that in action in Debbie. And Josh, you were at Debbie this year. Where did you go? Where did you stay? And where did you probably had to move that morning because the hurricane was a little bit off of Perry, Florida, where I stayed the night before.
Right. I ended up in Steinhatchee, just kind of right where it made landfall. It just kind of, just sort of drove to where it was coming in. It was one of those ones where you could adjust because the eye wall wasn't too bad, in terms of driving and stuff.
Yeah, I decided a little bit of sleep was valuable, and I woke up in the middle of the worst part of it and had the best seat in the house on the backside of the Hampton Inn, just watching those big longleaf pines below in that eye wall. It was quite interesting, but I had never been down to that part of the coast. Of course, Idalia last year. I know you were there for that. Steinhatchee was, right there for that, and that storm was pretty terrible. And fortunately, it could have been even worse, probably, if it had not kind of fizzled at the last minute. Brett, I bet you were there too, weren't you?
Yeah, yeah, and that was an interesting example. It's so funny, you look at the last 30, 40 years, there had been this thing where every hurricane that was approaching the northern Gulf Coast would weaken. Every single one. It just, Lily, Opal, Katrina, Rita, all of them. And people had it in their minds that this was hardwired. And actually, you mentioned, one of the ones in the previous era that did not do that, Eloise, strengthened up to landfall.
Mm-hmm.
Camille, actually, when they did reanalysis, they found it actually weakened and then re-strengthened before landfall. But there's no rule that says they have to weaken. And then we've had this burst the last few years of all these hurricanes doing RI right before landfall, on the northern Gulf Coast, like Laura, like Michael, et cetera. Everyone got used to that because people have like the sort of memories of gnats. They don't like, no one goes more than 10 years back, but everyone got used to that. And they thought, okay, Idalia is doing the same thing. And Idalia, man, right offshore, it had that really sexy eye wall, and then poof, it just like vaporized, turned into scrambled eggs. What was that came ashore? I couldn't even make sense of it. I mean, it was such a mess, but, and not to minimize it, but from it's a chaser's point of view, you kind of evaluate these things. They're like specimens, like you're sort of like you're sort of evaluating like, sort of like beautifully bred animals. And this was like, it was not a very structurally coherent system as it came in. It was destructive, but man, that thing, it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, it certainly could. That's for sure. So, you moved to Bay St. Louis for hurricane season during the pandemic, I suppose. Was that for geographic reasons, or why did you pick Bay St. Louis? Now I guess they call the folks that live there Bay Rats. Is that the term?
Committed Bay Rat. I'm 100%. I'm taking on the identity. Yeah. So it originally was a pandemic thing. I chase all around the world. Every hemisphere, everywhere. And actually, LA was my home base, and that made perfect sense. People would be like, if you're a hurricane chaser, why would you live in LA? Well, because from there you could get everywhere else. You could get to Australia, you could get to East Asia, you could get to the Caribbean. It was a great sort of stepping off point, a diving board to the rest of the world. With the pandemic, it's like, all right, no, there's going to be no global travel. You couldn't go to any other countries. And also, remember, for a while, people weren't even getting on airplanes. So I was like, all right, if I want to chase this year, I guess I got to just live in hurricane country. So I decided to just rent a cottage, and I looked on a map, and I'm like, all right, from what point can I drive to all the places that are going to get good hurricanes? And that was Mississippi. It's like a midpoint. So found a little cottage in Bay St. Louis. And as I kind of joke, I came for the hurricanes and I stayed for everything else. I just fell in love with the town. I love coastal Mississippi. I feel like it's one of the best kept secrets in the United States. Just a great place to live. And I love Bay St. Louis. It just, I never, I was born in New York City. I grew up in the New York area, went to school in Boston, then spent my whole adult life in LA. So I've always been a big city guy, never lived in a small town and not in the deep South. And it was just such a change in so many ways. And I really took to it. So after a few years of renting a house, I just decided, I'm gonna put down roots here. I like this town, and that's what happened.
Well, it's a
Josh,
beautiful place. I'm
I
sorry,
have
Troy.
No,
go
I
ahead.
have a question for Josh because I kind of laugh about this. I saw Josh, all the folks that came to Hurricane House for the visit here a few months back, right?
Party, yes.
Yeah, Hurricane. Yeah, and I got to see everything. And I'm wondering now. Okay, so it's we're recording on the second day of September of 2024. I figured now, Josh, that every emergency operations center in every southern Mississippi county would have a room set up in your house. Now, this is where their EOCs would all be after you plan so well for all this. It's really amazing what you've done there, from what I hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think I tried to I like Bay St. Louis has been ground zero for some of the worst hurricanes in American history. I mean, Katrina was wiped out. It was right front quadded. I mean, it was and the storm surge in Katrina was the highest on record in any hurricane in the Western Hemisphere. We're in Bay St. Louis, past Christian, that area.
Yeah.
But then going back further, Camille. The second strongest hurricane in American history, the Eye of Camille passed right over downtown Bay St. Louis when it had estimated winds of 175 miles an hour. So I knew, okay, if I'm building here, my property is just a block from the Gulf. You could see the Gulf of Mexico from the front lawn right there. Just, you could see it. Gives me a thrill. I love living there. It's kind of like, I think, being a storm chaser, you kind of like living on the edge a little bit. I think I almost enjoy the fear of just seeing the Gulf right there.
Josh, living on the edge a little bit. I mean, I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a lot of insurance. Just want to be clear. Okay. Actually, I joke about it. I did strategically pick the property. So coastal Mississippi has an elevation problem, as we all know. It's very
about Jackson, right? All the way to about Jackson.
No, it's crazy. I mean, and the other thing I didn't realize, this is something that I learned, is I didn't realize how different storm surge is depending on where you are, depending on the bathymetry, what's happening offshore under the water. So I grew up on Long Island in New York. I go to the beach every day during the summer. You walk out in the water, you go 20 feet out, you're in deep water. Okay. Mississippi, you walk a mile out and you're up to your knees. You can't get in the water. It's so frustrating. But that, it's so counterintuitive, but that's why the storm surges are so gargantuan, it's the water's so shallow, it amplifies it. And so there's that as well. So, so it's something to think about. I live in Old Town Bay St. Louis, which is actually, fittingly enough, the high part of town. It seems like the early settlers there, they kind of knew what would be the best place. So downtown and Old Town is higher. I'm at 19 feet, which probably doesn't sound high to people, but for coastal Mississippi, that's pretty high. And the house is raised on top of that. So not like high on stilts, but it's raised like 4 feet. So basically I'm good in anything but another 500-year event like Katrina. So I tried to, there's risk involved, but I tried to sort of take sensible risk. I mean, here's the deal. If you want to be risk-free, build your house up in Hattiesburg, I mean, you can't you can't live in
a pine tree will fall on it.
What's that?
And then a pine tree will fall on it.
Or an EF4 will run over you.
You got to live a little, and I like seeing the Gulf of Mexico from my front lawn. So that was the sort of balance that I struck.
And don't you ever apologize for asking a good question, Troy Kimmel, you Mississippi guy. So talk about the house for a minute, Josh, because this is important, because we've preached fortified, and fortified gold on here like crazy, had the folks on, talking about it, but talk about the process of building it from scratch, with a builder, walk through that, all the lessons that you learned, and now the gospel that you preach about that, because that's become your mantra.
Oh, 100%. So yeah, so I jumped into this without knowing anything, okay, about building a house or renovations, like nothing. So I kind of learned as I went. So I found a piece of property first, like where I wanted to be. and then design the house. So this is I'm in the historical district, so there's some design guidelines. You can't just like build anything, which I actually like that, because my original plan was to buy an old house and restore it, because I love the history of the area. I love the traditional architecture. So since I wasn't going to do that, I'm like, all right, I'm building a new house, but I built it in an historical style. So I wanted to really fit in, celebrate the local architecture. So I got a local draftswoman, who is, she's familiar with kind of designing in the kind of architectural vernaculars of the region. And we did because the lot it's narrow, but it's long. We did it like a New Orleans shotgun kind of style house, which is very base St. Louis. A lot of people don't realize this part of Mississippi is culturally more Louisiana than it is Mississippi. Architecturally, linguistically, in terms of religion, everything. It's actually an extension. It's almost like New Orleans East. So the architecture that you see in Bay St. Louis is very much like what you see in New Orleans. So it's a shotgun style house. So it's important to me to kind of have a very historical look. But then after getting past the aesthetic stuff, it was about, okay, how to design this thing to withstand any wind. So in terms of storm surge, it was like, all right, I'm on 19 feet of land. The house is raised 4 feet. That's going to be good storm surge wise and anything but another Katrina. So then it was a matter of just making it wind resistant and all the things I did. And I did do, the house is a fortified gold house, meaning I went through that process, which is really great. For anyone who doesn't know, a fortified gold means you've built to a certain standard defined by this organization called IBHS. And it's based on science in terms of like making the house wind resistant. And the process, the way it works is and I know you guys know this, but just for listeners, you have what's called an evaluator. It's a third party person who during the process, they come to the house at several points, like from when you're framing, and they look at everything really closely and they make sure that you're kind of what you're doing is adhering to the standards. And if it's not, they give you notes and tell you, okay, you need more straps here, more screws there, more wood here. They just give you inputs. And they come several times. It's like they're involved. The evaluator is like really involved with the process. He comes several times during the process. Now, at certain points, it added a couple little extra steps because there were little extra things we do. But think about the peace of mind. I mean, I trust my builder's amazing and he's awesome, but having this third-party evaluator checking the work and making sure it's good, that's extra peace of mind there, So finally you get to the end of the process and you have you get your fortified gold certification, which is one, it means it's going to withstand some crazy wind, but two, a lot of times it does get you some insurance discounts as well. So there's a lot of benefits to it.
And Josh, talk about how this may be the way of the future in combating the insurance problems that we face, especially in coastal areas.
I really think that this is the way to go. One thing I want to point out is I chase hurricanes and all over the world, and they have other names in other parts of the world. Of course, in East Asia, they're called typhoons. Australia, they're called cyclones. But I chase these things all over the world. And what I've learned is that you can build for hurricanes. You can build houses that aren't going to get touched. And I first noticed this when I started chasing typhoons in the Western Pacific. I go on these little Japanese islands and you'd come out after like an equivalent category 4 typhoon. And okay, that sign looks a little crooked. And okay, I see a broken window there, but like, that's it. Like, cause they don't mess around there. Like on Okinawa and Miyako-jima, it is solid. I mean, the cars will be thrown around like toys because they have those little cars, but so the cars are thrown all over the place by those winds, but the houses, man, they are rock solid, and you see very little infrastructure damage. Taiwan is pretty similar. So I started to realize, okay, in the U.S., we are very uneven. There are parts of the coastal U.S. that are as solid as Japan. And then there are parts that are just not. Places that just blow apart in category 2 winds. It is very uneven. But bringing it back to your point, I think the way of the future for me is to just build to coexist with hurricanes. They're going to happen. They're going to keep happening. Just build knowing that they're going to come back. I mean, that's how I built my house. We're going to get another Camille, with just build to coexist with these things rather than freaking out about them.
Well, and I can tell you from experience, since we were talking about Idalia, Ida, Ian, all those Florida storms over the last couple of years, My sister lives down there, outside of Perry, over near Cross City, and literally, she had no damage from any of the storms, thankfully, but her insurance adjustment this year went up 170%.
Yes.
And the insurance agent said, "Look, this is happening for everyone in the United States south of Interstate 10. It's happening on the coastal plain." So it's to a point now where it seems like it's getting to the fact of you're going to be forced to build. I mean, you're not going to be able to afford the insurance in these areas. So you're going to be forced to build to a certain standard. And like you mentioned, Josh, you're going to have to show that standard's being met. That if a Cat 5 with 200-mile-per-hour winds comes through with a 30-foot surge, that you're going to stand solid no matter what. Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to afford to live in that area.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. You hear about this, people who can no longer afford to stay in their houses simply because they can't insure them. I mean, wow, 170%. That is crazy. And she's made no claims. Her house is fine. It seems really unfair. Man, that's just that is not right. Oh,
Yeah, like a monthly increase of over $600 per month.
that's like, I mean, for most of us, that's like a big deal. We try to live on a budget. We try to control our burn. That's like a big, that's crazy.
Massive.
That's rent for some people in some parts of the country, $600 a month.
Well, and that's the
Like a
increase.
parking
That's
spot in
not
New
the
York.
total.
Sorry.
That's right.
No, that's the increase. That's not the total. So
Yeah.
what that's doing, basically, she's paying about 35% higher for the insurance versus the mortgage now.
Yep.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Josh, I got to tell you, having spent time with my buddies Brandon and Landon out at the WFO at Guam, they're good friends, and the team out there. I spent time out there. You're exactly right, because you can drive from that airport in Guam and you're looking at houses. I won't tell you what they're built like, but they're strong. Okay, I have a name for that, but I'm not going to say that here. I mean, it's really interesting to see it. But then you also, like you sort of have mentioned, I think Brett mentioned as well, you get in those areas where you have the lower income areas and the houses are not quite, and it's just completely, you see some houses stand up and then the one next to it completely gone.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and I'm not an engineer, but you can kind of see it, places where the stuff looks, that the houses look flimsier and things. And I've noticed that. And really the damage from hurricanes in the US, it's very variable. And part of it, of course, is the hurricane intensity, but part of it is where it's hitting and what the codes are like. And a lot of times what it seems like what happens is a place doesn't have stringent codes, then they get hit and then they build back better, and then they have like new codes. I know Mississippi has gone through that. I think that Mississippi now, Mississippi's having a building boom, 19 years after Katrina. Yep. I mean, it's just booming. I mean, from Bay St. Louis to Pascagoula, everyone wants to live there and there's like a lot of houses going up. And I think that listen, another Katrina would be extremely destructive, but I think that I think the place would fare better now. I really do.
What's interesting about the housing codes to me, I visited the Florida Panhandle last week and I went back to Mexico Beach.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had quite the experience.
You had some history. Yeah.
I had quite the experience when we abandoned vehicle. And then we decided to get into a house there during the eye wall of Michael as it was coming on shore. But I had that similar experience of, I think the Associated Press said I was dead or something, and bad stuff. But we retreated into a home. That home was built in like 1908. It's still standing firm, nice. Great. Everything around it, the biggest problem that I've seen, Josh, if you don't get the storm surge, it's the roof strapping. Yep. When the roof comes off, the walls collapse. And every house around us that was a newer built home, that's what happened. Our little 1908 shack that was a shotgun house with shrubbery all around it survived perfectly. Yeah. It still sits there to this day with all the new structures coming up around it. But I'm telling you, Mexico Beach, that place has come back tremendously in a 6-year period. Now, Tyndall, on the other hand, the Air Force Base,
has not. Yeah.
It's still trashed pretty badly.
Well, Brett, let me ask y'all a question real quick, Brett, because you bring this up and you can build to the best of your ability, but if those houses around you are progressively failing and roof
Right.
blows off, there's debris
Exactly.
now, which is going to cause damage where ordinarily you might not see it, and it's caused from the house, half a block over here.
Right. Right. And we saw that. Josh, you can speak more on that. But yeah, we saw debris flying through the air because we had the roof of one of the condos that was literally on the beach side come over the truck and just disintegrate the roadway during that system.
That's one of the things I worry about most in the wind is those kind of flying missiles. And a good hurricane resistant house like mine is built with that in mind, in terms of the siding that I use, the kind of roof, what goes over the windows. It's built assuming that the house is going to get slammed by flying missiles, those kinds of things. I mean, because that is the scariest part of hurricane winds is just all the stuff flying in the air. But it's funny about you say that about those old houses because there are ones like that in Bay St. Louis that they survived Camille, they survived Katrina, they survived the 1947 hurricane, and they're good. There's something about that the wood back then, or the buildings, the craftsmanship. But some of those old houses, man, are like awesome, and the new stuff is really, like new houses like mine are really solid. It's almost like the stuff in the middle. There was just a period where people were just, I don't know, throwing houses up too fast or something, or not thinking about it. That we have all that stuff that blows apart. But it does not surprise me at all to hear about a good, well-crafted old house, withstanding those winds.
James A., you're up. You were going to ask a question.
One thing we have talked about a lot, and this parallels what happens in California with wildfire risk and insurance too. How many people do you think are in some of these spots like the Gulf Coast of Mississippi and Alabama, Florida Panhandle, that are self-insured because they don't have a mortgage? They've had this house given to them through family ties or inherited it or something. And I mean, you're just talking wiping somebody completely out at that point. And I know it's happened to people in California.
Yeah, I don't have the statistics, but there's a lot of that, absolutely. And like you said, it's folks they don't have a mortgage, so they're not required to insure it. And I think that a lot of times it's one of those things where maybe that's not your long-term plan, but you know what, like this year I'm a little tight and it'll be okay. It's like you just kind of gamble, and usually the gamble is fine, but then once in a blue moon it's not, and it's part of it, all this is sort of understanding, okay, what are the return periods of these events, and I think that's like that factored into my thinking about whether to even build, so my block was just wiped out in Katrina. The only house on my block that survived was a little cinder block house next to mine, which was built by some little Mason dude, and it's been there since 1950. It's gone through everything. It was, I think, underwater in Katrina, but there it is. It's still there. Every other house on the block is new. So that I was thinking about that, and I was like, all right, so does it make sense to build there? But I decided it did, because Katrina was like that kind of surge, 300 to 500 year event, record-breaking highest on record in the Western Hemisphere. And I'm like, all right, if I diet and exercise and eat right, I'm going to be here another like 50 years at the most. And I calculated, okay, so there'll be another Katrina. The likelihood is like 1 in 8, 1 in 6 chance, maybe while I'm living, that's going to happen. Those were odds that I was okay with, bringing it back to that whole risk thing. And I think a lot of people do that kind of math in their head in terms of bringing it back to your point about insurance. I think that people gamble a little bit. I think maybe their intention is to get it at some point when their financials stabilize, and then they just don't.
I mean, we saw the same thing here with the two tornadoes, Barnsdall and Claremore. There were a lot of homeowners that inherited the house they were in and didn't have to have insurance, so they didn't have insurance. The next question. So you built a fortified house. How does insurance how should they deal with that? Should we get a credit on a premium? Should we reduce premium? I have no idea how the infrastructure and administration of something like that would be done when you've got hopefully a lot of people fortifying houses. And then is it fair for them to subsidize the people that aren't fortifying their houses but can still barely afford their insurance?
That's become a really big thing now in the Gulf Coast, and certain states are now sort of giving incentives, like Louisiana and Alabama in particular. Alabama is really really been out in the forefront with this. They have a fortified program where homeowners are incentivized to fortify, and they've had smashing success. Every time they have a new, they get like actually grants for the homeowners, and every time they have a new like sort of grant fund, and they make it available, it's like Taylor Swift tickets. Like as soon as it goes live, everyone's like on the site trying to get it, which is great because a lot of this is about people. Resilient, hurricane resistant building is going to happen because the consumers want it. It's not, builders aren't going to just decide to do it. It's going to be because consumers are demand it. And like the pharmaceutical companies know this, you know how now they go right to the consumer. Ask your doctor about, when we were growing up, that didn't happen. Like the doctors just decided what they would prescribe you. In this era we live in, the pharmaceutical companies put it in your head that you need this Ozempic or whatever, and then you ask your doctor about it. And I almost feel like that's how it's going to become the norm for houses to be built hurricane resistant. Is that all consumers have it in their minds that they want this and they demand this of their builders, and these grant programs really like they help with that. And I think that's how this needs to happen, and when they do, I try to be careful about this because I talk a lot at insurance events. Like I spoke at the Mississippi Insurance Department's their conference, and then I spoke at the Louisiana Insurance Department's event. So I talk a lot about this, and I'm careful not to speak on behalf of insurance companies. They all have their own ways of doing this and everything else. But it happens a lot of the times that when you have a fortified gold house or any kind of fortification, that you do see some savings in your rates, that they take that into account in terms of like, what your rate is.
Is there resistance with municipalities for strengthening building codes? Because I know we've seen that time and time again in tornado country. More actually strengthen their building code, whatever their baseline wind went up to from 105 to 130, something like that. But again, there was a lot of resistance from builders with that, but they still pushed it through. And again, because of consumer demand, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And there is that tension. It's like, the consumer who's asking, okay, are there enough straps, holding this roof down? Is there enough hardware? It's like annoying, it's like, it's like that patient that's asking too many questions, but that I think is what pushes it. I mean, listen, even a great builder, even a wonderful builder, they have their incentive, they're running a business, and time is money and materials are money. So they want to, not that they want to do the bare minimum, but they want to get the project done and move on. And that there can be tension between that desire and the need to make it super fortified. So I think that, like a fortified evaluator, is sort of a guardrail against that. And then also a knowledgeable consumer, a consumer that knows what questions to ask and has some basic understanding of what's needed. I mean, that was me. Like I learned, as I went, I learned about what makes a house hurricane resistant. I learned about what continuous load path means. And, we talked before about the roof. I mean, the roof is everything. I mean, to me, it's like, you could survive a lot of damage to the house, but if the roof comes off, it's game over. I mean, you're just forget it. And if the roof stays on, you're probably going to be okay. So that was an area like the house where I really emphasized. I got the best roof that money could buy. I got a standing seam, 24 gauge metal roof. That's like, because that's the kind. When I was in Dorian in the Bahamas, which was the strongest hurricane landfall on record in North America, tied with the 1935 Labor Day hurricane in Florida. After that hurricane, the place was devastated, but houses and buildings that had this kind of roof, this standing seam metal roof, I tell you, in the strongest of strong hurricanes, sustained winds of 185, gusts well over 200 miles an hour, those roofs looked untouched. Okay. So again, you could build for these things. But when I saw that kind of roof, I was like, all right, that's the kind of roof I want, because your roof stays on, you're probably going to be okay.
And talk about the windows and the siding. You mentioned the siding a moment ago, Josh, because I heard what you used there, and I can imagine that's a much more effective, coating, or what would the word be, for the outside of the building.
Yeah. So I'm a traditionalist, and I wanted like a house that looks historical. So I'm like, I'm going to have wood siding because I didn't know anything. And my builder was like, no, I'm not using wood, because, one thing, hurricanes aside, like coastal Mississippi, well, the entire deep South is like a really tough room for wood. It's like the moisture, the rot, the termites. I mean, it doesn't end, So wood is not the greatest thing. So I went with a fiber cement product. Full disclosure, I'm a brand ambassador for James Hardy Siding. But I'm a brand ambassador because I'm such a true believer in this product. But it's fiber cement siding. It looks like traditional wood. If you look at my house, it looks like it could be a 100-year-old house, but the siding literally it's this kind of cement. And one of the things I like about it, it's heavy. It's like the house is encased in this coat of armor, and it protects against, going back to what we were talking about before, flying debris, those flying missiles. I wanted something that hard on the exterior, that protective. And it's moisture resistant. Termites don't find it appetizing, doesn't burn. I mean, stuff is amazing. Sorry.
And Josh, talk about the windows for a second. How do you protect those?
So I think there's two basic paths you could take with your windows. You can go with impact glass, which is that kind of glass that, like, if a flying missile hits it, it might crack, but it won't like shatter inward. It'll protect the inside of the house. You can go that way, or you could go with shutters, some kind of a covering that goes over the house or over the windows. Now, you don't need both. It's one or the other is cool. Now, because of where I was building the historical district, I wanted the house to have a certain look. I'm like, I'm going to go with the shutters because I like the way they look. So for my house, I have a shutter system. Now, that doesn't mean you could have any windows you want. Like my windows are still, they're pressure rated windows. They're like, you still need a certain level of window to meet the codes. But yeah, so I have these heavy composite shutters that have a polycarbonate layer over them, and they're really easy to close and bolt up. I could probably button up the entire house in like 20 minutes, and the house is just like a vault. And it'll, it just completely protects the house. And that's really important, because something I learned, I want to just talk about this real fast, is wind. If a window breaks and the wind gets in, it's not, you don't want to avoid that just because you don't like flying glass and you don't want rain to get in. When wind gets in the house, it's like a balloon. It gets in, and then structural damage can start to happen because the air is getting into the house. I didn't realize this until I started seeing it happening in hurricanes that I was in. So you want to keep that house tightly sealed. There's this old wives' tale about open your windows a crack to equalize the pressure. That is nonsense. And actually, it's harmful. You got to keep your house totally sealed in hurricane winds, sealed tight.
One thing that we had at the AMS broadcasters meeting in Myrtle Beach back in June is we had a workshop, one of the AMS workshops, on the resilient Josh and Brett building standards, the goal standards and everything else. And what was interesting is they actually put hammers and nails and some roof segments in the classroom with us, which with a bunch of meteorologists was taking our lives in our hands. But we had these tools, and it was so interesting. Down, Josh and Brett, to the type of screw that you're using or the type of nail that you're using and what you're putting down there. And we said, just that, double up on that. And, it's not, in a way, it ends up costing more, of course, but at the same time, these are little things that, right?
100%. That's such a good point you say, because it's so true. It's like the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. A lot of the things that you need to do to keep your roof from blowing off in a hurricane are just like literally stupid things, like just extra nails.
Yeah.
And these straps that hold it down, that are just pretty cheap pieces of metal. They're very small investments, and they make all the difference in the world. I mean, some hurricane resistant stuff, like I wanted my house to be raised 4 feet above the ground because, for storm surge, and like that was a lot of concrete, and that cost me a lot of money, and that was painful. But straps and nails and screws, that stuff is like relatively cheap. And and the roofer explained this to me. He said a lot of it's just a function of how many screws.
Yep.
It's just like the more screws, the better. But one thing I'll say, got to a point, the way the rafters attached to the top plate, I started getting like totally neurotic about that. And like, and I'm coming to the building site every day, and I'm like, are there enough in there? Is there enough screws in there? And finally, my brother was like, dude, I mean, this poor guy, I mean, he daily calls from a neurotic Yankee for like a year, and he didn't lose it. And we're good friends still. We are he's like my friend. We do stuff together still. But he finally said, okay, you got to cool it. And he said, he's like, you could put so many screws in the wood that's wood's gonna start to come apart. He's like, we're not putting any more in.
Well, And it's amazing too, even in the not just hurricane prone areas. I would like to see more of the roof strapping used in tornado prone areas,
Absolutely.
because I think we're going to see a whole lot better results when it comes to some of these damaging, especially maybe the weaker tornadoes, right? We're going to see better results from those. But I mean, even the stronger tornadoes, and it's horrible that you kind of had to stay there over top of your builder, even though, you know, it was good guy, good friend, that type of stuff. It's remarkable the amount of builders that you may not necessarily be able to trust just because of what you've seen in past events. I mean, I know I've been on numerous tornado paths, and you know, the Weather Service is like, yeah, that's swept clean from an EF2, and it's because there's nails in the concrete. There's no anchor bolts. There's no seal plates. I mean, it's so bad. But I'm the same way. If I ever go to build another property, I'm going to be treating a builder the same way, and they're going to hate me by the end of that process.
It's so funny what you said about building for tornadoes. Like, I remember reading about that. There was this tornado in Maryland, and it was like the La Plata or La Plata,
La
but they
Plata.
thought it was EF5 because the houses were swept away, and then it was like downgraded like to EF2 or something like that, because they realized that the houses were they were sitting on the foundations purely from gravity.
Yep.
So it didn't really take much wind to blow them away. And you know, Tim Marshall, our friend, who's, you know, he's this hybrid engineer meteorologist, and he's one of these people, you know, he's one of the guys, for folks who don't know, he looks at tornado aftermaths, and then he tries to, you know, he helps sort of assess how strong the tornado was, where it was on the EF scale based on the damage. But what's so interesting is how many times Tim's finds an area with abject devastation, and it just looks like, you look at the pictures and you can't believe it. And the EF rating is not as high as you would think. It's only EF3 because the construction, because roofs were not properly fastened, because houses were sitting on foundations just from gravity alone, or all these other things. So going back to your point, Brett, I think this stuff would absolutely make a difference in tornado zones. And you think about it, you know, like when, you know, when an EF4, EF5 is moving through a town, you know, that area of EF5 winds is pretty small. A lot of places,
Right.
a lot of places are getting EF2 winds, or stuff that they could, you know, like they're near the funnel, but they're not quite in it. You know, houses that could get through it really well if they're just properly, if they're built like we build, you know, fortified houses for hurricanes.
Oh, exactly. That's absolutely right. The one thing that I found out this year with tropical cyclones and the damage issue that we may have from, you know, some of these homes that are not very well built. Did you get a chance? I know you went and you said you stayed in Steinhatchee. When you were down for Idalia, right? You were down there as well. Horseshoe Beach got devastated pretty good from that storm due to the surge and some of the wind impacts on that right eye wall, right?
Yeah.
So I talked to the mayor, and one of the things that I don't think people understand is, all right, they were damaged. They had several homes that were still at ground level at that point in time. So now you can't build homes at ground level in Horseshoe Beach. They've taken that away. The code has changed. All right, FEMA came in. Everybody was able to apply for the aid. So the homes that were in the lower level, I think you have to be 12 or 14 feet up now to be up to code. So if you sustained 75% of the home or the land value or less, FEMA came in, they were going to pay for your repairs and to lift the home up to that level, right?
Wow.
Well, get this. I spoke to the mayor before Debbie hit. Their concern was, if the property gets destroyed from Debbie that's still at ground level, I said, how does FEMA work with that? And he said, they don't. He said, because there's nothing left to rebuild or to raise. He said, it's a complete loss and none of it's covered. So from storm to storm, that amount of time is very key for some of those people too, because I mean, when you go through the process of dealing with the applications for FEMA, that can take months, even a year or two in some cases. Those people have such a limited amount of time because they live on the Gulf Coast. When's the next storm going to hit with that type of concern? You know, there's the possibility, if we had another 2005 season in some of those areas that got hit, like as we know, Katrina, then you had Rita. You know, if that storm hits the same area again, what's covered? So there's so many crazy stipulations to all of the aid and the timetable that you can work with that aid. before another storm hits is crazy. I just thought that that was something that a lot of people probably didn't know, that, Adalia hit you guys really hard to begin with. If Debbie comes in and takes you completely out, you may not be covered.
Mm.
Wow. Yeah, no, I didn't realize that. That's really interesting. And, it's funny the way you have these two hurricanes hitting the same place 1 year apart.
Right.
It's actually pretty common. When you look back at hurricane history, what you'll find is like hurricanes do. I'm kind of a history nerd, but I'm not chasing. I'm like reading about old storms. But you'll find these kind of clusters. I mean, look at Louisiana, 2020 to 2021, 2 category 4s, and like just a swarm of hurricanes there. You look at Florida, 2004, 2005. You look at Florida, also the post-war period, 1945 to 1950. Florida had a Cat 4 almost every one of those years, and one's hitting Miami and Fort Lauderdale. 1950s, it was New York and New England. Everything. My mom was a teenager in New York in the 50s. She said, "Oh yeah, we had hurricanes all the time." They did. They all went up the East Coast. It was a dead decade for the Gulf. One big exception, of course, Audrey in Louisiana. But that aside, so hurricanes do tend to cluster. So it's not like earthquakes where, okay, we had it, the energy was released, now we're good. It's actually the opposite. Sometimes when you get a hurricane, especially in a place that hasn't gotten it in a while, it's the start of could be a series.
James A., you're up. You've been piling up some questions here in the chat.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Builders aren't used to customers asking for things like this. We just built a little porch on, but it was an A-frame, and I'm really understanding how wind can get under that, lift it up. And so I was a giant pain in the what about, hey, reinforce these columns, reinforce the joists, reinforce the rafters. I want it all tied together. If not, this thing's going to take off like an airplane wing. When we're talking about building codes, and I put in chat the link, Kevin Simmons did a analysis on Moore's building code increase, which was 95 miles per hour to 135 miles per hour. And they did an analysis if that was taken statewide in Oklahoma, because the majority of tornadoes are EF0s, EF1s, EF2s, that you strengthen the low end of the building code and you've prevented a lot of damage. You've held the unit of the house, you've held the roof on, as you were talking about how important that is. And their estimation is $10.7 billion in savings if the building code was taken to 135 miles per hour just in Oklahoma. And Bill wanted me to mention in Galveston after the big hurricane, I believe it was the 1900 one. It might have been 1915 that I think about it, but I can look it up. They raised the whole island block by block, utilities, water lines, sewers, including that big church. And they did it all with hand screw jacks, which is, there are pictures out there, which it's amazing to see.
Like, how do they do that? Like, yeah. I was shocked when I learned that about Galveston. They just raised everything. It just seems insane, but good for them.
So while you guys are talking about building codes and all that stuff, I wanted to actually see your house. And so a quick search, Josh, and there's a recent article about your hurricane house from Dr. Marshall Shepard in Forbes. So I'll make sure that gets into the show notes. But I love it. It's so super cute. And I like the hurricane on the gable there.
So
your ornament there.
Yeah, that's my logo, which also have a pinky ring with it, but it's my, I have a Storm Chaser logo. Yeah, and it's a little, it's an ornament on the gable of the house just to give it like sort of a, signature to it, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. So how long did it take to build the house, and when was it all complete?
It took about, I think we broke ground. It took like, I think about 10 months. It took a little like longer than expected. There's this thing in life where you can have, everyone wants stuff fast, cheap, and good, and you can have two. So I got cheap and good. So it took a little while. So, it was like my builder was great, and he was like trying to, because I was really trying to, the house I built was, let's just put it this way, it should have been more expensive than what I paid. I mean, I just really got deals and stuff. Part of it was being a brand ambassador, but my builder was great. He really worked to find, good local craftsmen who were like maybe not the most expensive. And sometimes we had to wait for like that certain bricklayer or those framers. We'd have to wait for some resource to become available. So that meant that We weren't getting it done as fast as I would like, but it was to do it right and to stay on budget. So about 10 months. I think we started building March 2023, I think is when we broke ground. And I moved into it on January 31st of this year. So that was about how long it took. I think if people wanted to crank through, they could build a house faster. But and by the way, in case people are curious, it's like a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. It's a 1,276 square feet of heated space, which, by the way, to you guys probably sounds really small. To me, I've lived in cities my whole life. To me, it's like enormous. Like I feel like I'm getting a workout, like walking from the living room to like my bedroom. I mean, it's like it feels really big to me. But with the porches, it's almost 1,800 square feet. It's a front porch and a back porch. So it's a, it's not a big house, but it's a good sized house for me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was talking about your house to my wife. We were going to pick up barbecue tonight, Josh, and I think she had in her mind that this was going to be some monstrosity. And she went and looked at probably the same article you saw, Jen, and she's like, "This is cute. I love this," So she loved the
So cute.
aesthetics of it,
Thank
and
you.
everything else, is a bonus. Now, you mentioned just a second ago a self-proclaimed Yankee, now a Bay Rat. Right now it's 84 over 73 there, Josh, and that's probably a good night. How have you embraced the heat and humidity of the Mississippi Gulf Coast?
I love it. I love it. It's part of what I like about it. I just think I think first of all, as a storm chaser, you associate warmth and humidity and instability with like possibility. Things might happen. Whereas cool, dry, comfortable, you're like boring, game over. So I think there's some of that. You just, but I've always loved the heat and humidity. I sit on the porch late at night on those hot nights. I just like in that still air. I love it. And I don't like sleeping in that, when I go to sleep, the house is like, the thermostat is set to morgue setting. But just sitting out on the porch or being out, I love that time of year. In fact, the way it's starting to cool off now, I always get a little sad this time of year.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not a big fall fan. I know James Spann's a huge, huge fan of fall, but give me spring and summer, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And so now I wanted to talk about your weather station because you've put a pretty special weather station there. Josh, tell us about that.
I'm very excited about this. So I'm a block and a half from the Gulf of Mexico. I've got very good exposure. I'm like, I need a weather station where I can really measure what's going to happen. And it's one of my biggest frustrations is like, whenever a hurricane comes ashore, there's never a station, like an official station that's perfectly situated in the right front quad to like, measure the maximum winds. And if it is, it fails or it's not official or it's at the wrong height or whatever else. So I decided, all right, I'm going to build something. So when there's another Katrina or another Camille, I'm going to get amazing measurements. So I worked with Campbell Scientific, who they produce like the just top of the line weather stations. And I worked with my friend James Hyde, who's a Mesonet manager from Maryland. What he does for a living is he designs Mesonet solutions. He and Campbell Scientific and I worked together to create a solution. So the first step was I had, when I finished building the house, I had basically what looks like it's like a giant power pole, like one of those big wooden poles put on the back lawn, far from the house, 10 meters up, so that the anemometer can be at the correct height for measuring wind. And then we designed the weather station and had to put up there, and it is a Mesonet grade weather station on my back lawn, and all the data goes to the cloud. The final step in the process is I'm going to have soon on my website. There's going to be a page that has the data live at all times, and there's going to be several redundant connections to the cloud, so that even if we get a massive hurricane, those readings should stay live as this thing is going. I have an RM Young anemometer, a heavy duty anemometer that goes up to 195 knots, 224 miles an hour. Like I said, a block and a half from the Gulf. I mean, if we get another big hurricane, this thing, I think I don't think any flying debris would hit it because it's not an urban area. I think that we're going to, at some point, this station's going to get amazing, sexy data in some future hurricane.
What about a camera? I might know a guy.
There is a camera on it. There is a camera on it. I'd be
But
curious.
is it a has cam, Josh?
That's right.
No, and I probably should, Brett, I should have coordinated with you, but it's not too late. So maybe you can have a look and let me know what you think of the solution that's on hand.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Everything we can NVR it all for you, so you can go back and look at it.
So Josh, that let's see what other, the party. Troy mentioned the party. The party must have been the event of the year in Mississippi. Talk about some of the guests that came.
It was crazy. So I decided that on the first day of hurricane season, I wanted to kind of celebrate hurricane preparedness. So it's a hurricane season kickoff party. And I was careful to say it was not a sort of a party to summon a hurricane from the Gulf of Mexico. It was a party to celebrate preparedness and also to kind of like reveal the house to, just like the public, I guess. So it was a big, it started small and it ended up becoming a big event. James Hardy, my client, sponsored it. I think we had about 140 people, and it was a real motley crew. It was everyone from the folks who worked on the house, building it, to insurance commissioners from Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, to neighbors, to storm chasers. I mean, like literally, it was like everyone you could think of, and that's the best kind of parties. You just have like a real mix of people, and it was just a lot of fun, and it was a great way to kind of show off the house. And also, like I said, to really kind of celebrate resilience, and resistant building. And it was such a hit that it's going to become it's going to be an annual event. So mark your calendars, everyone. Everyone in this call is invited. Or in this podcast, it'll be Saturday, June 7th, the first Saturday of hurricane season. And James, Span in particular, I'm going to insist on your presence this year. I let it go this last year that you couldn't come, but that's not going to be acceptable this coming year.
No, I got plenty of time. It's on the book. It is on the book with a red letter on it now. So I love the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I'm telling you, so many people have never been there, and the culture, the people. I agree with you. I think it's a treasure, and you've hit a great place, and I love the story. So no, I'm all in. Maybe we should do show 1000 down there.
I was just thinking the same
say.
thing, James.
Yep,
Man,
yep.
that's a really good idea.
Seriously, let's mark it. Let's do that. Let's do it on the front porch. You know what I mean?
Oh, that'd be fun.
awesome.
That'd be
Yeah.
great.
That'd be awesome. I would
hopefully
totally take that. Yeah, no, that'd be great. Yeah, no, I'm glad. And just for folks that don't know, James couldn't come because you got a book signing that day or something.
Yeah. A contractual agreement where I have to fulfill my duties.
You have to book him 2 years in advance, Josh, and you have to be a 6th grade class or third grade, even better.
Third. They love me in 3rd grade.
If somebody will bake a cake,
Josh,
he'll be there.
look, this Dorian, that was terrifying. I mean, for all of us from a distance, it was terrifying. What was it like during that stretch when there was radio silence and nobody knew if you were alive or dead? I mean, kind of go through what happened with that.
That was definitely like, I think that was sort of the peak of my chasing career in terms of like the ultimate hurricane, in terms of like the intensity of it, just off the charts. The fact that it hit during the day so I could see it. And then it just, everything about it was like the ultimate hurricane. The data I collected, in the eye, one of my barometers went down to 913 millibars, which is like nuclear grade. That's
nuts.
crazy.
Nuts.
Yeah. So, the going through the eye wall, that was just really scary. One interesting thing was once the wind really started to rip, I was in a small concrete classroom on a hill. So I was above the storm surge, but just really getting raked by the wind. Once it really started to rip, you couldn't see anything. You could only on the downwind side of the room, there were cyclone shutters. I was looking through the cracks. Everything had just turned white. You couldn't see anything, but you could feel the vibrations and the energy. Our ears were killing us from the pressure changes from the gusts hitting the building. The force of the wind hitting the building, it was like sledgehammers hitting the walls. It was frightening. When we got to the eye, things brightened, and it was like that white curtain just lifted up and everything just looked crazy. Cars just had disappeared. That had blown away. Another car had landed somewhere else on top of a tree. Everything was but it was like you didn't see anything happen because it was just behind this white curtain. We're in the eye for a while. The building we're in was so badly damaged, we had to find somewhere else to go to get on the to right at the backside. Now, we knew I didn't have radar or anything at this point, but I knew we were in the eye just because the pressure was so low. It was the scariest drive of my life. Out of the 11 of us in this room, I was with 10 people I didn't know, 2 families and a couple other guys. only 3 of us had cars that were working. One of them was mine. The car next to mine blew away. Mine just didn't move for some reason. But we all piled into the 3 cars, and it was the scariest thing in my life, getting on the road, trying to find a new place to ride out the backside, because I didn't have radar. I had no idea when that backside was going to sweep in, because those winds were lethal. But we did find a government building to ride out the backside. But then afterward, I was stuck there for days. It was a complete breakdown of society, just a complete breakdown of order. It was heartbreaking. You just were around people who had lost everything, and it was something. And I didn't want to be in the way. I lived in my car. What I did was my car became my living space, and I just organized it really nice, kept it clean. I rationed my supplies, so I had a certain amount that I could have for breakfast, certain amount for lunch, certain amount for dinner, so I didn't run out. Because the last thing, you don't want to be a burden when you're in a disaster zone. You, like, rule number 1, don't be a burden. I just tried to be helpful during that time. Since I had a car that was functioning, I brought one guy to his wrecked house so he can get his stuff. I took another guy to the medical clinic. Just tried to be helpful, just in small ways. Not, just don't be dead weight, don't be a burden, be helpful while you're there. And then, and I tried to also be really zen. This is something I learned when I first started doing these international chases, and I'd get trapped somewhere afterward. I'd really get freaked out about it. And I've learned over the years, I just tell myself, you want to be this big shot hunting down category 5s in island nations. This is part of it, is you're stuck there afterward. And you just, if you can't deal with it, don't do it. So I just got very zen, and I said, I'll get off this island at some point. It's going to happen. And, eventually I got off.
When did you get communication again? When were you able to restore communication and let the world know that you're okay?
Helicoptered out and landed on Nassau, which was the most New Providence Island, which is the most populated island of Bahamas. That's when I landed on that island, which had not been hit. My signal came back, phone went crazy, just ping, 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 ping. And I didn't realize how much everyone had freaked out and how I was presumed dead, and all my friends were mourning me and all this like crazy stuff. So I was like rising from the dead. And, it was like people were seeing like literally like a ghost. That's when I realized how serious it was, how upset everyone had been. I don't know why those rumors went around. I mean, the communications went out. I think that's how the internet is, or social media, just the rumor starts, and it just gets flamed, and then it becomes reality. But yeah.
How do you deal with fear, or do you have any fear? I mean, this whole thing's terrifying. At some point, surely you had fear that crept into your soul.
I do. So I tried. So one thing I've learned, I've learned how to. It's like athletes have to do this. Like you learn how to, like when you're in a chase and you're in the part where like everything's crazy and it's dangerous and like you're not sure what to do next. And I learned how to just get really centered and think about the next thing I need to do, and just focus on that task and try to just do them in order and just stay focused on the tasks at hand, and don't get excited. Just do one thing at a time. There's that. And then, when I was stuck on the island afterward, it was just a matter of just you just like use your mind and you think it through. You're like, I'm going to be fine. I'm stuck here for a while, but at some point I'm going to get off. And it is what it is, and just try to be sensible, and that's all that you could do. But a lot of it is controlling. It is learning how, I don't want to say control your emotions, but how to like almost like take a deep breath and coexist with the emotions, and just kind of let them go through you rather than like holding on to them. I'm sounding very Californian all of a sudden, like a meditation teacher, but it's like, it's part of that's how it is. Let the emotions go through you rather than clenching onto them.
So Brett, how would you compare that to your experience with Michael?
I agree. You literally can't think about the fear. In my case, I had a guy that was with me. So he was working with me at the time. He was driving the vehicle. So my concern is more on him. We maintained communication for a while during the eye wall. We lost it. There was a water tower 2 blocks from us that fell during the height of the winds, and it cut the Verizon fiber line. So that was our line out because the cell phone tower was right there. It severed the line, which I assume was coming in from Panama City. We lost communication. So we focused on taking care of what we could control. We knew we had to get away from the water. Number one, the water was our biggest concern because we just didn't know how high the water was going to get because we were chest deep when we abandoned the car. And then we went for higher ground, which ended up being, the correct decision. The higher storm surge literally ended up being a couple of 1,000 yards to our west. We were just to the east of the peak surge. I'm sure you guys all are very familiar with Miss Ginger Z, who was down there, and she was probably closer to that peak surge. There were a lot of vehicles, a lot of satellite trucks lost during that time, but we were able to sustain in that literally that little shotgun house. We went in when we lost the phone. I recorded a lot of video during that time period. I had a good cell battery, thank goodness. And so we recorded video. We were kind of sitting in the center of the house because I could see all four corners of the roof and it was peeling up. You could see it go up. And as the winds would relax, it would just like the house was breathing. And we were just waiting, is this roof going to come off? Or are we going to have to, go to shelter? And the eye came in. At that point, when we were able to walk outside, the eye kind of got a little bit dirty there as it was coming in, but we were able to walk outside, and at that point, we knew we were good, and we were looking in all directions and seeing everybody around us that was not good. So we went straight into search and rescue mode as a couple of local sheriff's officers pulled up during that point in time. But the biggest key for us was, and as Josh mentioned, that moment of zen or remaining focus. I would just call it extreme focus. I mean, it's almost like a Alabama football game that Nick Saban's coaching. Focus, focus, focus. He's pounding that into the players' minds as they're on the field. For me, that was it. We had to focus on the task at hand, and we were able to survive that. Now, were we lucky? After looking at everything around us, we were extremely lucky. We learned lots of lessons from that experience, but I think we handled that pretty well. And I'm thankful that, we're here to talk about it today.
You were chest deep in
Bill
the
Murray.
Yeah, we were chest deep.
This stuff is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
That's really high.
Well, we were right on. I think it's Highway 98 that runs the coastline. We were on that coastal highway. I was working for a company at that point in time, and we were going back and forth about, you can get to the eye, and I'm like, no, I cannot get to the eye. I need to go inland. I had communicated. We were in Port St. Joe, and I had done my last live shots before the eye wall started coming in there, and it was starting to get really bad. Well, there was a hospital there that had a parking lot with an elevation of 25, 26 feet. And I'm like, we're fine. We'll be fine there. There was a little pressure to go toward the eye, and we had a bit of an argument there. Matter of fact, we were live streaming out of the vehicle at the time. That argument kind of went out over the airwaves, and I finally caved, which was my bad decision there. I caved, and I knew we couldn't make it to get in position for the eye to move in because we needed to get on the other side of Mexico Beach so that we didn't have to deal with that catastrophic storm surge. But, again, lessons learned for sure. The bad thing is, and I don't want to say this out loud, Josh, but if you knew you would survive a situation like that again, what are you going to do? You're going to go right back into the teeth of it again?
Yeah. This is what makes you like a storm chaser. It's
now,
like you're just
I'm going to be a lot more strategic about going into it, and I know a lot more. I mean, we had scouted that area for 3 days, and we knew that Mexico Beach was probably the absolute worst because you had no parking garage structure there. You had no real elevation unless you went inland. And then you've got national forest north of Mexico Beach that goes up into Wewahichka is a little community. I mean, there were thousands of pine trees that came down on that road. So we basically had to luckily we were placed right in between the surge and the wind, and we made it out.
So Brett, is that the secret when you're chasing? Is a good parking structure?
You know, parking, I like to know where the good parking garages are located. Matter of fact, we'll pin them down on Google Maps, Apple Maps, so that we've got all of those, marked down as at least a place of retreat. Because, like Josh, I like to experience it. I like to be in the thick of it for as long as I possibly can. But I also like to have places that I know that I can retreat from flying debris.
And I'll say that the parking structure thing, it's sort of very in vogue now with storm chasers to find the parking structures. And what happens is they become basically storm chaser jamborees. And
Right.
for me, I'm always, when I'm chasing, I'm like wanting to be far from other storm chasers, not because I'm standoffish or I'm not friendly, but the whole joy of, or I shouldn't say the joy, but you feel you're really bringing value when you're getting an angle on the storm that no one else is getting. You're getting a shot that no one else is getting. You're getting a perspective that no one else is getting. That's how you're kind of bringing value. And if you're in a parking garage with 40 other guys shooting the same thing, there's no opportunity to bring value or to kind of get a unique perspective on the storm. So I avoid the parking structures like the plague, but they are, as I think Brett put it really well, I see them as points of retreat. Like if you're really in trouble, know where they are.
Right. And that was where I was at. Just like here's a great example. You were down for Barrel down in Texas, I assume, for that mess.
Yeah.
We stayed on San Luis Pass versus going further south to Surfside because there were 300 people in Surfside, and I was the only person with maybe one other sitting in San Luis Pass. We had a pretty good tornado that passed by us, and then 6-7 feet of surge, and we were in a safe spot. Now water was all the way around us, but we were in a safe spot, and I didn't have to worry about numerous other individuals. And again, nothing against other chasers when they're in the field, but I like to also try to get something a little bit more unique versus having the same thing.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I've noticed there's a little cultural difference between tornado chasers and hurricane chasers. I noticed that tornado chasers are more like pack animals, and the hurricane chasers, at least the ones who are like really just focused on hurricanes, were a little more like almost like the cats were a little more standoffish, kind of like to do our own things. There's definitely a personality difference between the two communities. I know a lot of people in there are kind of crossover types. There's very few who specialize only in one or the other, but I've noticed there's definitely a cultural difference there. Not to get into the arcane world of storm chaser personalities, but
Oh, go ahead. It's just us girls.
Oh, please,
that's-
let's do.
Well, that's almost like comparing, and James can tell you this. I've done it for many years. Originally, Dixie Alley is one of the worst places on the planet to chase, especially in some of the mountainous terrain of the Appalachians. And this is where I learned basically how to hone in those skills before going to the plains. And this is going to sound terrible, but to go out to the plains for me is like a vacation compared to doing this in the Appalachians and the deep South.
I'm not a tornado guy. I'm very narrowly specialized in hurricanes, but I learned that recently. Someone was explaining to me about Dixie chasing and the level of skill it requires, and just like how it's a totally different sport, and how that really tests your skills, not being out in those flat states to the west. And no, that's really interesting. So you feel that learning there in that really tough turf basically prepared you for anything, like anything else is easy.
Well, I mean, we didn't have many that did it here. James, I want to say, I did it. John Brown was another one that was really good here.
Yeah.
Yep. It's very few. And now my concern is more or less the roadways, because we've got so many more coming from all parts of the country when we have big events here. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a concern for me because, I hate to bring 2013 up, but I definitely don't want to deal with anything like that, again.
But just to add to your point, I look at chasing in some of these developing nations, like the way you talk about like chasing Dixie Alley, how hard it is. Like chasing in Mexico, like parts of Mexico, no radar in large parts of the area. It could be that the roads aren't paved in certain places. You've got other kinds of dangers and challenges. There could be mountains. it's so tough. There's a language barrier that, to me, that those really test you. It's like altitude training for a runner. It's like it's like, training like at a high altitude, so there's no little oxygen and you learn how to be tough. And then I come back to the United States to chase, and it's like vacation. It's so easy chasing hurricanes in the United States because we got great roads. Every location is covered by 3 radar sites. They're just like the infrastructure, the population density. It's so easy. The real test is, it's like my Dixie Alley is like, parts of rural Mexico, parts of the
Right.
Philippines, the jungles of the Philippines, certain Japanese islands. That's where your metals really tested as a chaser. The US stuff is kind of like, oh, okay, these are, I mean, not to trivialize them, they're devastating events, but as chase subjects, they're easy.
Right.
Does
I'm going to go
anybody-
ahead and rent a house in Taipei right now, since it looks like that whole alley's about to get going. So I'll catch you there.
Right.
Yeah, does anybody, how there's a certain group of golfers that'll only play with wood sticks? Does anybody chase tornadoes with only an AM radio and a no weather radio like we used to do back in the day? It actually works, and it's a lot less crowded back.
I
in the
would
day.
love that. Honestly,
Oh my gosh!
my first chase, and again, my first planes chase was the big May 29th, 2004 Harper County supercell in Kansas.
Mhm.
And I had a prepaid cell phone and a handheld map. And I happened to run into, of all people, Jeff Petrowski in the field. And, he was nice. And I ended up seeing, 20 or 30 tornadoes off that one cell, whatever it dropped. But that was my high school trip when I graduated. I literally graduated the day before and drove all night to the plains to chase that. But it's so much less stressful because now all of the media stuff, all of the streaming things that are going on, social media, communications, I would just love to do that just one time, just to reminisce on what the days used to be like.
Yeah,
there we go. Now we're like the guys on the porch with the rocket
listen to
chair.
both kinds of music on the way out there, country and western.
And stopping at the Days Inn for a little bit of internet, Brett. Pull up in the parking lot and then watching the owner pull the plug on the internet when he sees you out in the parking lot.
That's right. No, everything's password protected now, so you
can't do that anymore. Josh, talk about Shan for a minute and the barriers. You just mentioned that, all those challenges. I know this is very competitive for you. How do you overcome all those things?
So the big international chases, if you think of it as like a whole, I have to go across the world to like get on this like one like little island where the typhoon's going to hit. If you think of it like that, it feels overwhelming. So again, I break it into tasks. Like, okay, first I just need to get to Japan, and I need to get to southern Japan. Then I need to drive. It's like if you break it into sequential tasks, it becomes manageable, and most of the time you're able to get into the right place. And that was the case with that. The computer models were all over the place with it. I feel like they're better in the Atlantic, where you'll see the spaghetti plots. They all kind of go in the same way, and they're kind of like, okay, they vary in terms of where the landfall point's going to be, but they're all kind of going in the same like highway. A lot of times when you're chasing the Western Pacific, it looks like an old ratty hairbrush. It's just like a squash spider. They're just like the tracks are in every direction. So you have no idea. So like I landed in Osaka, and that just ended up being completely wrong. And I had to go we had to go up to Tokyo and fly back down to Kagoshima. Big mess. But got in position for it. Now, mainland Japan, the islands that make up mainland, the main big island is called Honshu. That's the one that Tokyo is on. And then there's a couple other ones called Shikoku and then Kyushu. Those are the big fat islands that make up what's called mainland Japan. So generally, mainland Japan does not get intense typhoons. The little tiny islands between mainland Japan and Taiwan, the Ryukyu Islands, Okinawa, Miyakojima, those get the intense ones. So this is mainland Japan. I'm kind of like not that excited about chasing typhoons up there because they're usually kind of garbage. It's the kind of stuff that skims the Outer Banks of North Carolina. No offense, but just there's not like the sexiest specimens. But I was kind of bored. There's nothing to chase. It's peak season. I want to get on the court and play matches. So I went out to go for it, and actually came in. It was surprisingly intense. It was a real, we got right front quadded, and it was that kind of wind that scares you a little bit. It was like, like the kind of howl, like that roaring howling sound. And, But what's so interesting is, I mean, the winds were really ripping. I was in a little town called Makorazaki. Very little flying debris. Not to bring it full circle, but the way they build there, it's so tough. There's just very little flying debris, even at the height of the storm. And it was like it was some ferocious wind. It was a good typhoon, and it was a good expedition. I want to go back for a second to something you guys were talking about a second ago about chasing now versus chasing when we started. And I'll tell you, you get a certain high, chasing, and you have an audience cheering you on, and you get some sexy clips and you share them and you get incredible engagement and you get like a buzz from that. But something else is lost. I've noticed this, when my first chases, my early chases in the 90s, I didn't even bring a camera. Okay. I wasn't even thinking to record it. I just wanted to like be in the moment. And this is of course before social media and everything else. I just wanted to experience it in that moment. There was nothing about documentation, collecting data, video, nothing. I notice now I get so stuck with all the multitasking of live hits and tweeting and setting up my instruments and getting the trophy shot that I like I'm not feeling it and connecting with it. And so it's like in certain chases, I started at a certain point when I'm in the eye wall and it's really ripping, just take a couple of minutes to put the camera down, just take it in, remember why you started doing this in the first place, because you can get disconnected from it. And I think for a while I did, and it was a bad place to be. Became all about the business, the audience, the vanity, all that stuff. I mean, I like everyone else, I fell prey to it, and I tried to kind of get myself back to the basics a little.
Josh, talk about your close friendship with chaser James Reynolds. How did you meet, and how has that friendship evolved over the years?
He's like my bestie in the storm chasing world. James is a British dude who lives in Tokyo. His wife is Japanese, and he lives there. And he's like the world's top typhoon chaser. Like that, the Western Pacific is his specialty. But like me, he also chases around the world. In terms of total number of penetrations, he's my closest competitor. And we started chasing together. It was like an online friendship. And then in 2013, we went on a bunch of chases together in the Western Pacific, which ended with Super Typhoon Haiyan, which was this devastating Category 5 that just flattened a city in the Philippines at the height of the storm. Another dude we were with and I jumped in the water to rescue people. James caught that on video. That video went viral. That actually started my TV career. It was a devastating event. Thousands dead. We developed a very deep bond from that. And also I developed this deep bond to the city. I tend not to, I'm all about the event as it happens. And then after the hurricane, I just leave. That city, Tacloban City, I actually, there's something about just the scale of the tragedy really rattled me. I didn't want to chase again for a while after that. I was kind of disturbed by it. And one of the things I started doing was going back. I went back a couple months after. I went back a year after. I went back 10 years after. Just to see the place come rise up from the ashes, and it was very therapeutic. But back to James. So we were chasing together. Then we weren't for a while. We're competitors. We're good friends, but we're also competitors. We didn't talk for a couple of years, and then we kind of sort of started talking again. I think because our lives are so similar, we're both dealing with the same challenges of being like these top global chasers and all the pressures with that. We kind of needed each other, and we started talking again. And and now I would say we've developed a really durable friendship. I mean, he's like one of my very dearest friends, and we actually chased Shan Shan together.
That's great. So y'all got to actually chase together, and I'm sure he's a big help in navigating some of the local challenges.
First time in a decade. Yeah, no, James, I mean, he's a real subject matter expert in that region, in the kind of Japan, Taiwan, Philippines region. I learned some good tricks from him, and then, for many years I was just there chasing on my own. A lot of times now, like, sometimes in some of those countries, I like to work with a fixer. Makes it a little easier. I've chased in all those countries solo,
Right.
In Taiwan, in Japan, and the Philippines. It's always a little easier when you have a fixer. Like it kind of, just with the language barriers and stuff like that. The Philippines driving is a little crazy. It's nice to have a driver. So those things help. But yeah, chasing with James, it was fun. It was the first time we chased together in a decade. So it was kind of like a cool reunion.
Yeah, very interestingly, one of our listeners, James Lewis, coincidentally suggested that we have James on the show. So please put a bug in his ear and maybe you can come back with him, because I don't think we got to 1/4 of my questions tonight. And my wife already texted me. She's like, "You're going to have him back again just to get to all those questions that you had and all those storms you wanted to go through tonight." But talk about your shows, Josh. The shows you've done, and what's coming up here in the future for you.
So I did. I've started 2 series. The first was called Hurricane Man, which was actually a British series. It was a UK TV BBC series. So the genesis of that was this producer in the United Kingdom, a British guy, just reached out to me and said, "Hey, we should make a show about you." And it kind of developed, and it was called Hurricane Man. So I signed my contract and I went to London to kind of meet the executives and then meet the team. And so the concept for the show was a British film crew follows me around the world for a season as I'm hunting down storms all over the world. And I remember, oh my God, meeting, all of us being from North America, we live in weather-wise the most violent continent on the planet. In the UK, they don't get the kind of weather we do. So I was dealing with these are real weather virgins. I was really concerned. I'm like, okay, they're not going to be able to survive. But they were soldiers. They were amazing. And actually the whole crew, we broke up into groups, but the whole crew went through Category 5 Michael by the end of the season. So they were great. But they literally followed me around the world as I hunted down all these storms. And that series was Hurricane Man. It was awesome. It was really cool. My second series is called Mission Hurricane, and that was a different concept where it's kind of a retrospective where each episode I bring you back into one of my past expeditions, kind of talking about like what I was feeling at the time and everything else, and it's mixed in with live footage from the moment and everything else. And that series did really well too. We're talking about doing a second series of Mission Hurricane. It just depends on sort of part of it is what content I collect this year.
And talk about that, because this season in a lot of ways is considered to be a dud, but we're not through it yet. We're only at the midway point. So talk about this season and what your expectations are for the rest of it.
Well, so I chase all around the world, so it's always going to be busy somewhere. So like that's just the way it is. Like the globe rarely has a sort of a bad year in terms of hurricanes. It's just where is it happening? The last 7 years have been big Atlantic years. This was supposed to be another one. It's looking like maybe not. So that what it means for me is I think I'm going to be kind of hunting down my stories, in other places. So I'm thinking I'm going to be in like the change for me is I'm thinking maybe it's going to be in East Asia, India, Australia kind of year. And those are the kinds of stories I'm going to be hunting down. That might not be Atlantic stories, might not be US stories. And Lord knows we can use a break. I mean, we went 10 years without a major hitting the US, and it was like, wow, is the Atlantic broken? Are majors not going to hit the US anymore? And then starting 2017, I called Harvey like the return of the American hurricane. But that 2017 has been the start of an unbelievable, when you look back at the historical record, an unbelievable string of intense American landfalls. I mean, every year we're getting just slammed. So maybe this is the year where the trend where the kind of the streak breaks. Now, I want to be really clear because folks are listening. We are in the heart. We're not at the peak of hurricane season yet. Anything could happen. Don't let your guard down. But it is encouraging so far what we've been seeing. Just things are having trouble forming.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on the next system here coming through the Eastern Caribbean right now?
God, it was amazing. The models were all just, 36 hours ago. I mean, the Euro ensembles, the GFS ensembles, everything brought like an intense hurricane into the Gulf. It looked like, all right, here we go. And then they all just poof, they just like backed off. So, I have to admit, I got faked out because I thought once you get the Euro and the GFS on the same page, you think, all right, it's happening. And, there's something going on this year. I'm not like I'm an expert at hunting down the storm. I'm really good at that, just sniffing out where the center is and getting in there no matter what. Where I'm a little weaker on is like the physics behind what's happening and why it's happening. And I see some of the kind of the smarter guys like the PhDs online trying to theorize, but just there's something that's retarding the growth of these systems. Like they're just having trouble. Like they just can't seem to get the convection going.
And I'll say, goodness, it is so challenging, dealing with where we are now. A lot of people are mad at the preseason. You know, the preseason stuff was horrifying. Doomsday. The oceans are boiling. This will be the worst year in recorded history for hurricanes. But it was all doomsday stuff. And here we are, and we had Beryl, and we still might have a big hurricane. Who knows? But I'm just not a big fan of these seasonal outlooks because I think they do more harm than good, in my opinion. And what do you do with the information? Let's say you live in Biloxi. You know, they expect above average, below average. All it takes is how many? One.
Right.
And if it comes right through your town, it's a big year. So I don't know, but there's clearly an anomaly in the upper air pattern in Africa. And I think you can see that. And there's also been some cooling of the SSTs off the African coast. And to me, it seems like if anything happens, it's going to be homegrown in the next few months, which might happen.
Dust.
But,
a ton of Saharan dust as well.
Yeah.
yeah.
James, I agree with you
And-
that if we get something, it's going to be homegrown. And I know what you mean about with the seasonal forecast. I look forward to them, but I know what you mean. It's like, what is the actionable? What's the action item from it? And there is none, because even if it's going to be a lame season, you should always be prepared at the beginning of the season. So it technically shouldn't matter.
I don't know what the end user does with the information. Joe Q Public that lives in, you know, Pensacola or Galveston or wherever, and I just don't know. You know, there's just a lot of things we can do, and there's a lot of things we cannot do well in the weather enterprise. And you know, the seasonal outlooks, they're fine. But of course, what we fight when nothing happens, the YouTubers and the TikTok dancers, they've got to make their money off the creator content fund. So they're gonna do everything they can to make people. Just a few days ago, you had a big YouTuber showing a Category 4 graphic coming up on the Florida Panhandle, Category 4. And this is what they do. And you know, and I know that horse will never come back in the barn. But my question is, why do people consistently follow this stuff where it's wrong? It's almost like a religion where the YouTubers and the TikTok dancers cannot do any wrong. And we've lost, as we've said many times, our ability to think critically in this country. And we don't know what truth is. We don't know what fiction is. We don't know what a reliable source is. So hopefully people will find a reliable source for hurricane information. So anyway, we have to take a break, guys. If y'all can stay a few more minutes, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to get Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We've got Jen and This Week in Tornado History. We'll come back with a quick email segment and picks of the week as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
There's a comet moving through our part of the solar system right now that, if you've not already heard about it, you probably will in the coming weeks. Comet C 2023 A3 Chuchusan Atlas was discovered back, as the name suggests, in 2023. Once the orbit was figured out, it generated some excitement that it might become visible in the September or October of 2024 timeframe. Hopes of that dimmed a bit as the comet itself dimmed throughout the rest of 2023. It even prompted a paper to be written predicting that the comet was likely to disintegrate before reaching perihelion, that point in its orbit closest to the sun. But we're not there yet. Comet Atlas reaches that perihelion point on September 27th, and its risk of breaking up increases until then. But the latest numbers suggest that visibility could start getting good around the third week of September. It's expected to get brighter as it continues to draw closer to the sun over that next week, but will likely be lost in the sun's glow. The next opportunity, should it survive, begins that second week of October, as the comet heads back out of the solar system again. We'll have a few days where it's bright enough and separated enough from the sun to be seen, perhaps even bright enough to continue to be visible as it rises higher above the tree line, giving more of us the opportunity to see this icy visitor. The best place to see this comet is where the eastern horizon is the least cluttered. That gives you the opportunity to see it when it's closer to the horizon, which is also when the sun is furthest below the horizon, giving you a nice dark sky. Places like beaches along the east coast, the western shore of one of the Great Lakes, or any higher elevation are great places to try. More on this in the coming weeks. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, a damaging tornado given a rating of F3 hit at 4:20 p.m. Central Time on Labor Day, September 2nd, 2002 in Rusk County, Wisconsin. It was one of 6 tornadoes reported across Wisconsin on this day. The tornado began just to the west of Ladysmith and traveled 16 miles. The National Weather Service survey conducted the next day determined that the most severe damage did occur in downtown Ladysmith. In an area 4 blocks wide and 16 blocks long, 40 buildings were destroyed and 159 damaged. A church was blown off its foundation. The survey, though, did determine that the church was barely attached to that foundation. A pickup truck was thrown into a tree, and 2 old brick buildings collapsed. Once it left town, it began to weaken, but it did strike a number of rural homes, producing some F1 and F2 damage before dissipating south of Ingram. There were no fatalities, and 27 injuries were reported. Only 2 weeks prior to the tornado hitting, emergency response personnel had gathered for training on how to react to severe storms and tornadoes. The police chief of Ladysmith at the time credited that training for helping the community respond to this devastating event. We document this tornado event and hundreds more on our website, tornadotalk.com.
Okay, so I see that Jen had to leave a little early, Bill, so no email segment this week. So let's go right into picks of the week. This is where we go around the horn. Everybody has something that's weather related. This can be a data source, website, video, anything remotely weather related. And so, and let's see, I know that we lost Troy. James A., I know that you've got to back out. So let's go right to James A. first and get his pick of the week. Go.
Yeah, mine's the old standard, the IEM Cal that Daryl does such a great job of, and it's the tornado warning event count by Weather Forecast Office so far this year. And Tinseltown Rick Smith's office leading the parade with 143, and James, Birmingham, 5. Wow.
Count them on one hand, 5.
Amazing.
This is reminiscent of the 1980s, which was very calm here. And even up in the Tennessee Valley, Huntsville had one bad night. If you take out that one bad night, it's been very inactive. So this year it's been the Great Plains and not down here, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, to me, that's fascinating. That really tells a story by looking at that map. So we'll put all this on weatherbrains.com. My pick of the week, it is a pretty well-written piece about the Labor Day hurricane of 1935 that came through the Florida Keys on this date, September 2nd, 1935. And the loss of life was, we really don't know the exact number, probably close to 500, but there was some just horrifying stories of what happened with this Category 5 hurricane. Of course, back in those days, you didn't have the Hurricane Center, no warnings, no watches. Many people didn't know. But fascinating historical weather disaster on this date back in 1935. All right, so let's see. I guess, Brett Adair, we'll throw to you, man. Give us a good pick. Go.
I love PhD Tomer Berg's tropical weather page. That is a great resource, especially if you want to follow the individual storms with the ensemble model plots. I love that page.
Mm-hmm. No, it is. I totally agree. It's absolutely outstanding. And for those that are not aware of that, we'll put a link up on the website, weatherbrains.com. Just a great resource for hurricane season. All right, Josh, I know you got something really, really good. So lay it on us.
Well, I'm a history nerd. When I'm not chasing hurricanes, I'm like wanting to like look at the old data. And my favorite resource is one that just sort of has all the old official data and visualizes it for you. It's coast.noaa.gov/hurricanes. Not the most memorable like URL. coast.noaa.gov/hurricanes. And basically, you can look up any old hurricane or any typhoon, and it's going to have the official track with the intensities and everything else. It's my go-to resource when I want to look at history. And I want to tell young chasers, what makes you a good chaser is knowing the climatology, knowing what's happened in previous in a certain location in the past, because the past sort of foretells the future. Gives you sort of clues. You'll be a better chaser if you know your history, and this is a great resource for that.
Indeed. And again, that'll be up on weatherbrains.com. Bill Murray, what do you have for us this week?
Yeah, James Spann. I'm going to pick the National Weather Service in Mobile put out a tweet late this afternoon. Today's the anniversary of Hurricane Elena moving into the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And Josh, there probably was some talk down your way about that one because that was the wrong way hurricane. You know, it was going for Mobile, turned for Tampa, and then turned on the Sunday before Labor Day, and made a beeline.
Did the hokey pokey down there? The hokey pokey.
And James, I wanted to thank some of our listeners. They're coming in with guest ideas that are great. I already mentioned James Lewis's suggestion, coincidental of tonight's discussion. Herschel Jenkins wrote in with a great suggestion to have a severe weather forecasting episode. Herschel, I'm one step ahead of you. We're going to do that. That's very exciting. And there's also one other one, Nathan Foy. And I'm trying to find the listener who suggested that, and I can't put my finger on it right now. But that's a great guest suggestion too. So I'll be working on that. Dan Lamp will join us next week. We'll be live from the NWA. James A. will be in charge with Kim Cloco McLean there in Irving, Texas on the 16th. And I'm building a formidable list of guests, and this has been a great kickoff tonight for WeatherBrains 3.0, James Spann. I don't know if it looks any different than it did, but we're going to have some great additional guests coming up here in future weeks.
Yeah. So, Brett, first off to you. Good. Let's plug social media, plug whatever you need to plug. Go plug anything. This is your plug-a-rama. Go.
I don't have a personal Twitter anymore. I've kind of gotten rid of that. So, our company, Live Storms Media, we have all kind of cool resources there where we'll throw up videos and stuff of interesting pieces. And then I do still have my meteorologist Brett Adair page on Facebook, so you can find me there if you would like. And started getting into this new thing all the kids are doing with TikTok recently. I have no idea why.
Do you cuss or dance, Brett? We never know.
I don't do either, so I'm not successful.
No, that's the deal. When you open up TikTok, they're either dancing, they're funny, or they're cussing. One of the three. And so, I'm like you,
Brett. I have no followers.
Yeah, I have no humor. I certainly don't dance well, and I'm not much of a cusser guy. I know all the words. Because I worked in a TV news department for all these years, but I'm not much of a cusser guy. But no, go follow Brett on the talk. So Josh, what do you need to plug? Go.
If folks want to follow me in my adventures, best places are I'm on all the platforms, but the best ones are Twitter and Facebook. And my handle is iCyclone, the letter I and the word cyclone. That's how you can just kind of follow my work.
Great. And it's Chase accounts on there. They're just fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, if you're not following these guys, there's something wrong with you. You need to go do it right now. And again, we could carry this discussion on for a long time, but time is of the essence here. So we got to wrap this one up. If you're new to this, WeatherBrains is typically on the air Monday nights at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. And we produce it live on YouTube. You can watch the live video version, youtube.com/WeatherBrains. But we know that most of you listen to the audio podcast that's released late Monday night, early Tuesday morning. If you want to get in touch with us, our email, Bill, thanks to Bill Murray, it's working again. I'm so excited. I'm back in the loop.
And we proved that all those notices you got today were for spam, James. That was good news.
Okay. Email at weatherbrains.com. So if you need to get in touch with us, want to ask a question, guest suggestion, lay it on us. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
And James, tell the folks at Disney to get their stuff together with UVerse so I can watch ESPN again. They've even blocked out my computer now.
Wow. Just get YouTube TV. I've used YouTube TV for years.
I'm about to switch, but I need the internet. Ever. I'm afraid they'll charge me $1 zillion to unbundle the cable.
I love YouTube.
We have AT&T fiber, and it has nothing to do with anything else.
But it's bundled, so they're going to probably jack the price if I unbundle it.
Mine's pretty cheap. It's unbundled.
I'm gonna tell
YouTube
them
TV.
You said to cut me a deal.
There's a spam
YouTube
discount
TV.
work on that?
We'll send them an invoice.